January 19th, 1993. It is a day that will live on in all Hawkeye fans. Today we remember Chris Street, Locked On Hawkeyes.
You are Locked On Hawkeyes, your daily podcast on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in. I'm Trent Condon, and this is the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We're available wherever you find podcasts. You can also watch us on YouTube. Hit subscribe while you're there. Helps us get in front of more Hawkeye fans. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Today, we're going to do things a little bit differently. We're going to get into the current Hawkeye talk. We're going to get ready for tonight's matchup as the men face off against Minnesota. An incredibly important game as they have to get back on the right side of things and get these bad feelings certainly changed inside the men's basketball program. We'll talk about that. Scott Docterman is also going to join us from The Athletic. We're going to talk with Doc a little bit about Mark Gronowski, his thoughts on the injuries and where the concern may lie with that one. We'll also talk to him a little bit about the Iowa basketball program. But here we are, a couple of days past the 32nd anniversary of the passing of Chris Street. And for anybody that's listened to the show, watched the show, knows me, knows my love of Iowa sports. Yes, Iowa football was always there, but the biggest thing for me growing up was Iowa basketball. And that's why maybe at times I'm a little tougher on the basketball program. That's where my frustrations are. For anybody that's ever watched an Iowa men's basketball game with me, it's a different kind of experience. I absolutely love it. It is what made me a sport fan. And where I am today doing what I do, really, I can trace easily back to Iowa basketball. It was a different time. It was a different era. And Iowa basketball was the thing. And right now I'm rereading Emotion in Motion. It was the book that Rick Brown put out a while back. Former Des Moines Register writer, was on the Iowa beat for a number of years and was incredibly close to the Street family. And going through and reading that one, and I'm only about halfway through the second read and read it when it came out years ago, but going through it again, just tracing back his time growing up. And, you know, the similarities that I saw between him and myself, you wanted to be a Hawkeye. You wanted to be wearing the black and gold. That's what it was about. That was the end game for everybody in the state. At least it felt that way. Maybe it was my little niche. Maybe it was my little area, whatever it was, but that's what it felt like. You wanted to be a Hawkeye. You were going to do anything to be a Hawkeye. And Chris Street lived it, did it, and what it meant to be a Hawkeye. And he was the embodiment of that. He was that guy. For maybe young people out there, and I know we have a lot of young viewers and listeners that are out there. If you don't know this story, if you don't know the depth to it and why Chris Street, why we remember him every single year, and why 32 years later, Chris Street, why his name still matters to the program, is because of what Iowa basketball meant to the state, what the Hawkeyes meant at that time, and how important this basketball program was. And Chris Street, being an Iowan, being a native kid, being that tenacious, hardworking, up in your face all the time guy, he is exactly what you wanted to be if you were a basketball player. That was the guy that you emulated. That was the guy that you were shooting for. You wanted to be Chris Street. He was that guy. I remember vividly the night of his passing. And as I was watching TV that night, only had 3 channels. There was no ESPN on. It was the local CBS affiliate up in North Iowa, KIMT. And it was one of those news breaks that they do, you know, the little 10-second kind of preview coming up in the 9 o'clock hour. Coming up at 10, the passing of an Iowa basketball player. And as soon as I heard it, my stomach just absolutely dropped. And in the next, whatever it was, 20, 30, 40 minutes, after that little 5-second clip, all I could think about, well, at first you go, is it a current or is it former? What's happening there? There's no internet. There's no jumping on your phone, seeing what the latest was happening, what people are talking about on social media. It was just left stewing, thinking. My one thought, as callous as it was, anybody but Chris Street. Anybody but 40. And as I sat in anticipation and just waiting for the broadcast to go, me sitting there as a 12-year-old kid, anybody but Chris. And it happened. And the tears, sitting alone in my bedroom, the tears that came from that. And it's still tough today because he was that guy. And he was a great basketball player, no doubt. He was excellent. He was fun to watch. Mentioned the tenacity at the front of the press and the full court press of Dr. Tom. And when you had the athletes to do it, it was an absolute thing of beauty. When Iowa would be down, you always had that little hope. Maybe the press can get us back into it. We get a couple of steals, knock down a couple of three-pointers, and suddenly the Hawks are right back in it. And there were so many great games, and there were so many times that did happen, and the comeback and making it happen time after time after time, and the excitement that was created for Iowa basketball. The memories start to fade away a little bit. There's a number of great documentaries out there about Chris Street. If maybe your memory's fading a little bit, or if you are one of those young people out there, do yourself a favor. Go watch it. Go listen to it. Keep those memories alive. Keep the memory of Chris Street going. And let's build this thing back. And let's get that going again. And get those good feelings and those good vibes going like they were. His final game on the road at Cameron Indoor Stadium against Duke. Knocks down his free throws, 34 consecutive. We know what Jordan Bohannon did, missing the free throw to keep that record intact for Chris Street. The team then coming back after his passing, after a couple of games were moved around, going to Michigan State. A team that you could see was out of it. Just didn't have it that night in the Breslin Center. And come roaring back. And do it with AC Earl and Val Barnes and just guys making plays. Follow that up on Super Bowl Sunday with the nation watching against the Fab Five in Michigan. The first game back in Carver-Hawkeye Arena. It's incredible. And you saw the documentary on Big Ten Network. If you didn't, look it up. Jim Nantz, who was there on the call that day. His memories of that one. One of the biggest names in broadcasting. And still, one of his favorite memories, he has said, is calling that game. And Mike and Patty, Chris's parents, on hand, get the game ball afterwards. It's absolutely incredible. Just an absolutely incredible what that team was able to accomplish. How they were able to keep going and persevering after losing a teammate, losing a star, losing our guy. All of us Iowans. That was our dude. Never want to forget Chris Street. We're going to get back into the now side of things as we take a peek back. A little bit different. I understand that, but we're going to get into the here and now. We'll talk with Scott Docterman from The Athletic, get his perspective on Mark Gronowski, the injury, plus we'll preview tonight's matchup as Iowa faces off against Minnesota. That's all here to come on Locked On Hawkeyes. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5. How about this? Get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. The FanDuel Sportsbook app is easy to navigate, and the variety of bets keeps every game exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. No more waiting around for your winnings. Whether you're betting on your favorite team or just looking to add some extra excitement to the playoffs, FanDuel has you covered. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
Scott Docterman joins us from The Athletic. His latest piece on Mark Gronowski has been published at The Athletic, if you're a Hawkeye fan. And I think his first line in the piece was about scar tissue, and pretty appropriate. Doc, I'm paraphrasing, but I'm glad scar tissue made it into your column very early, because there clearly is some there and lingering after the last few years. Good afternoon, Doc. How are you?
I can't complain other than the temperature outside. It's, all is well. I don't have to scoop any sidewalks today. So
Yep.
We're good.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about that scar tissue that Hawkeye fans have, and I get it. And Mark Gronowski, like for whatever reason, I was never really on the McNamara bandwagon. I just, he's good. I get it where he played, etc., where that school was. But I thought there was a lot of reasons Michigan reached the highs that they did. But despite the quarterback, I'll put it that way. Gronowski, on the other hand, he feels like this is different. Doc, does it feel like that to you?
It should, yeah. I mean, I guess in some ways what I looked at when McNamara came, that I thought, okay, well, at least this guy, you're going to get a minimum standard, which I don't think we got. What I don't think Iowa fans got. I don't think Iowa got from him. I thought that it would be something higher than what we saw the last 2 years. And based on what we see, it was kind of like when a couple of years ago, when everybody's talking about how he led Michigan to the playoff. Now he was there with Michigan, and Michigan led him to the playoff. It's completely different with Mark Gronowski. And when you watch South Dakota State play and have watched them play for the last few years, he's been the straw that stirs the drink. I mean, Tucker Kraft was terrific, and they've got some other really good players there. I mean, they could be a bowl team if they were in a group of 5 conference or what have you. But he's legit, and he's legit in every area. But when the news was, I guess, sent out. I mean, I'd heard about it earlier in the day that it was coming down, and that he was going to have a shoulder procedure, and then everybody the Iowa fan base is on such a wild emotional pendulum for everything, and it just went from being, hey, this is a good move, to, oh, this is just like McNamara, this sucks. Why didn't we know about this before? And it's just everybody just needs to take a step back. Take a breath, calm down. He's not Cade McNamara. I know we've had some issues here. This is a completely different situation. And you know what? Iowa spent a lot to get him.
Yeah.
He's just about as good as any player in the portal at that position. So I think maybe people should, dare I say, be a little bit excited and celebrate it, or is that too much for Iowa fans?
Just real quick, Trent. 1.3, is that number accurate, Doc? Million when it comes to Gronowski?
No.
Was that high?
No, it's more.
It's more.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's more.
Wow.
A different world that we're living in. Very, very
good
quickly.
for him.
Yes.
Good for him.
With the injury, what can you tell us in terms of what it is? What do you know? What can you pass along? Because that's another thing. People hear injury, they start freaking out. So what is this injury?
Well, I think it's from what I've gathered it's like a slight tear maybe in the labrum, but I might be off on that. Okay. So don't officially quote me, even though I just threw it out there. But yeah, it's one of those that can be repaired fairly early, and it's one that takes a little bit of time to heal, but overall it's not one that's gonna, he didn't have the Spencer Petras situation, let's put it that way, where he, had not only his labrum torn, but his rotator cuff and, just completely shredded. I mean, this is one he could play with, but it's one that's pretty painful and it takes miles off your fastball. So if you get it repaired, sit out a few months, you'll be fine.
We shall see. Obviously, fingers crossed that is the case. And while he can't throw in the spring, he can do other stuff, right? He can be on the field with his teammates. No, he's not going to be chucking the ball all over the field, but he still can participate where he can, correct?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, the one good thing, I guess, if there is one good thing about having a shoulder versus, say, the ACL that Cade McNamara had was, at least with the shoulder, you could still take snaps.
Yeah. You
could still run the offense. I mean, you want to be careful, of course. I don't know, what extent and how healthy he'll be, to hand off the ball, but you could actually work with the offense. I mean, the one thing with an ACL is you don't want to be pushing off on your knee when you're doing your,
right,
drop backs or moving laterally, especially laterally. It's difficult. So I think he'll be okay to be a part of it. It's just a matter of throwing, and throwing is an issue that he's got to be, really careful with. And then, but by and large, by the time summer workout starts, he should be all the way back, ready to go.
So they'll do some more portal shopping after when the spring period happens. Doesn't sound like anything on the horizon on the here and now. If classes start tomorrow, so off we go. What's more important, finding a left tackle or finding another cornerback?
That's a great question. I mean, I do think they need another defensive back, just to if nothing else, to compete. I mean, the interesting part is, do they believe that the guys that are currently there, both at offensive tackle or in the secondary, or do they believe that those guys are capable of winning the job and competing at a high level, or do they need somebody to replace them? And, some of that's through growth. I mean, you are a developmental program. So, is there a chance that somebody like Deshaun Lee or TJ Hall could develop and be Michael Ojemudia or Matt Hankins? Is it possible? I mean, they're still pretty young. Or can a Trevor Lauk, move into that role and be better? Or do they need to go get somebody? I mean, it's if you want to go get a starting left tackle, at the Big Ten level, I mean, you're looking at close to 7 figures these days. So I don't know, how they're going to go for it, but I think, I could see them definitely getting a defensive back coming in for for June. That's for sure.
Doc, a couple on basketball. You covered basketball for so long when you were at the Gazette. On Friday night, I don't know if you were able to sit down and watch the game. It felt like rock bottom, particularly, I guess, in the first 20 minutes of the game. It just feels like everybody had checked out, and that's probably unfair to the entire roster, but that feels like where we're at. Does this feel different to you, Scott? Can you draw a comparison to any of the years when you were on the beat covering men's basketball as to where this 2024-25 men's program is at right now?
The sad part is it's really comparable to just about everything we've seen over the last 7 or 8 years. And that is, this is a team offensively that can do is what it really wants most nights. And then defensively, you need a stop or two. And I would say that the UCLA game felt like it was just there was no life, at least for the first half, which was really unusual. But the USC game to me was probably a little more problematic because it showed you everything that this team is capable of and why it doesn't win big games. And important games. And I think when it came late in the game and they cut the lead, they showed their offense, it's great, and they're down to a couple of possessions, then they just let it slip away. And it's because they can't defend anybody in clutch situations. And it's just, it's perpetual. It's year over year. It doesn't matter who's out on the floor. It just happens that way. And that comes back to style and coaching. It just does. And I think, we've talked a lot about apathy, and I think that's part of it too. But I think the players have to have faith and trust that things are going to change or get better, and we just haven't seen that. And maybe it was rock bottom as far as this program goes for the road, but they're coming back. They're playing Minnesota and Penn State this week. Those are games that they could win. Mm-hmm. Just a week ago, we're talking about how great they played against Indiana. Yeah. So it's just, but that doesn't build any confidence for anybody. That if you go on the road and get mopped and then you win at home against teams you're capable of beating, it's hard to get people excited about it. It's hard to get the players to believe that they can win those games. And so I think this team's probably one that's going to be on the bubble, and unless they can create some stops on a road game or two, it's not going to happen for them.
I know a lot of Hawkeye fans probably watching the game over the weekend with their brethren, the Cyclones, and see Darren DeVries and Iowa winning that game and doing it with a pretty depleted roster right now. Financially, Iowa football, we know they're in great shape. Iowa basketball, if it came to it, a buyout of Fran McCaffrey, going out and getting a new staff. Are the financials there? Is that a concern, or should it be a concern for the athletic department as a whole with this changing landscape in college athletics?
Yeah, it should be a slight concern, but not the concern. I mean, Fran's buyouts right now, $4.2 million. If it's after the season, that's something that Iowa can afford. I mean, it afforded, whatever, how many years ago it was with Todd Licklider, $2.4 million, which felt like a lot then, but really
couldn't afford to keep
him.
Yep.
Yeah, but I think what you're looking at way back then versus even now, the last time Iowa made $4 million in season or in ticket sales from any season was 2005.
Jeez.
I mean, we're talking 20 years ago was the last time they reached that level. What should they be at a normal trajectory? 6.5 million, maybe 7. Like some of the other teams that used to be in their tier, they're now beyond them, like in Illinois and in Indiana, Purdue. So I think you've got to look big picture here. And Fran is and how do you do this with Fran? Because does he deserve to be fired? That's something you don't want to throw out there if because he hasn't really done that. But I think that there's a way to amicably move on both of them, and probably paying that buyout as part of it or some of it, and then Darren DeVries or another one. I think they just need some energy and probably a new focus.
Yep.
And I know there's a lot of people afraid of what happened with Tom Davis 25 years ago. It's a different world. I mean, Iowa basketball back then was almost as big as Iowa football. Now there's a clear separation.
Mm-hmm.
I think you've got to re-energize the fan base and find a way and take that risk. Back then, you could argue the other way a little bit more palatably than you probably can now.
What do you got coming up this week at the Athletic, Doc?
Yeah, I wrote about Gronowski today. I'm also I'm doing something on the playoff and putting together like an all 22 from the playoff. The best
Nice.
The teams from the tournament, and then looking ahead at a few other things. I probably will go to tomorrow night's game just to kind of get a glimpse. But then I'm also doing some other basketball stories as well.
Good stuff. We'll look forward to him at the Athletic. Scott Docterman joins us on Mondays. Doc, thank you. Appreciate it. We'll talk to you in a week's time. Thank you, Doc.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Scott Docterman as we check in on Iowa.
Today's episode of Locked On Hawkeyes is brought to you by Prize Picks, the place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions in winnings, Prize Picks has changed the game in daily fantasy sports. Whether it's the playoffs or regular season, Prize Picks has made it easier than ever to win big while enjoying all the football action. Now that it's playoff time, there's no better way to get in on the action than with Prize Picks. Here's how it works. You simply pick more or less on at least two players. And if your pick hits, you can wind up with 1,000 times your cash. That's right, 1,000 times your money just by making a few simple picks. For me, it's all about hitting something and the hot takes this week. This week on Prize Picks, I'm taking a look at Travis Kelce. Monster performance last week. Can he make it 2 in a row? Playoff Kelce, he is different. Does he get more or less than 70 receiving yards? How about Patrick Mahomes? More or less 2 touchdown passes. That's what you do. It's fun to predict and easy to play. Plus, with Prize Picks Flex Play, you can still double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. And with the app, you get your winnings fast, sometimes as little as 15 minutes. Ready to run your game this football season? Download the app today. Make sure you use the code. It's Locked On College. That'll get you $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 just for playing. Don't wait. Take your game to the next level with Prize Picks. Prize Picks, run your game. Trent Condon back with you one final time. Locked On Hawkeyes. Thanks for being with us here today. And thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. Make sure you hit that subscribe button while you're here if you're watching on YouTube, or a 5-star review over on the podcast side. Those things help the metrics and definitely help us get in front of more Hawkeye fans. All right, wrapping things up here today as Iowa faces off against Minnesota. On the surface, not a great game. The weather is dreadful. It's going to be god-awful cold. It's going to be freezing out there, so you got that component. If you don't have parking very close to Carver-Hawkeye Arena, I think that's going to keep people away. Look, we've seen this plenty throughout the years, right? All right, you get this where it's going to be difficult to get there, tough to find parking, or even if you find parking, it's a haul, right? You got to put your coat on. It's a mess. Now, that was one thing in the era we talked about earlier with Chris Street. Now we're in the era where you can watch it at home. Yes, you could in the past. You can also watch it in crystal clear, high definition. You can watch it in the comfort of your home. You want to have a beer? You can have it. Cocktail, soda, water, snacks, bathroom right around the corner. You have it all right there. Not the case going to Carver. It's a different world. The entertainment dollar doesn't go as far. And I would anticipate this is going to be one of the lowest actual attendance Big Ten games that we have seen in a long time for Iowa. Maybe ever at Carver-Hawkeye Arena. I mean, yes, there's been weather games when they haven't been able to get anybody there. There was a couple thousand, was a Nebraska game a couple years ago. And of course the weird 2020 year, 21 year, but that aside, that's what we're setting up here. Iowa, no excuses though. Enough. The defense has been dreadful. It has gone, as we talked about the other day, has been the 354th ranked defense over the last week in all of college basketball. It's hideous. They're favored by 7.5. Ken Pomeroy has Iowa favored by 10. Yet we've seen Iowa struggle against middling Nebraska, Northwestern teams at home. We've seen them struggle against some pretty average opponents. Minnesota's below average. This is certainly, Minnesota's not as good as Northwestern or Nebraska. But this isn't also a sure thing. So what's Minnesota going to do here? They're going to slow it down. They're going to want to play at their pace. And Ben Johnson, he is going to take the air out of the ball. Tempo, they're 358th in the country. Average possession length, 337. That shows you they want to slow this thing down. They want to grind it to a halt. They want to ugly this thing up. And they do have a really talented guy inside in Dawson Garcia. Garcia's been around now for a long time, and he's been an absolute stud. Now, began his career at Marquette, went to North Carolina for a year, has been with the Gophers now for the past 3 seasons. He's good. He's a good player inside, and there's another one. Owen Freeman, got to stay out of foul trouble. But the thing about Dawson Garcia is not just what he does inside the arc, where he is really good, but he can also step out and hit a three. Now, not half-court heaves like he had against Michigan, but he can step out and knock it down. In fact, he's one of the best three-point shooters. But doesn't it feel like every year that when Iowa plays Minnesota, there's always a Gopher that goes off? There's always a Gopher that has a career night against the Hawks. And I know it's not every time. It's just years and years of memory. Who was it? Charles Buggs? Was that guy's name? I think it's Charles Buggs. And came in like with 2 3-pointers in career, hit 6 in the game. Who's going to be the guy for the Gophers tonight? I've got a couple options. How about this one? Femi Adokale. He's shooting 20% from behind the arc this year. 5 of 24. Circle that guy. How about Brennan Rigsby? He's shooting 23% from behind the arc. There's a couple of names for you. Look into the prop market, take over on both those guys. 3-pointers, man. I'm beat down. Let's just have a night of fun. How about that? Can we just have a game where Iowa plays well? They're not screwing around. Just take it to the Gophers. Another thing I've talked about a lot in the past is Minnesota. That is my rivalry game. I grew up in North Iowa. I have friends, family from Minneapolis, cousins that went to Minnesota, friends that I know that went to Minnesota. So this is my rivalry game. And football's bigger than basketball when it comes to that. But I just hate losing this one. Let's get it done. Just throttle the Gophers. Just put it to them. Absolutely dominate. Let's get some good vibes going. Is it going to lead to anything for this Iowa basketball team? I don't think so. I don't think that even if Iowa rips off the next 3, that realistically is going to be a team that ends the season on the right side of the bubble. They still have so much work that needs to be done. Still searching for that first quad 1 victory. This would not be one. In fact, they wouldn't get one until the Ohio State game coming up a week from Monday on the 27th. Got to start here. Do it. Get it done. Dominate this one. That's what we're looking for here and get an Iowa victory. We will be back with you with a Rapid Reaction podcast after it goes final tonight with Iowa and Minnesota. One way or the other, we'll be back with you and give you thoughts on this basketball squad. Can they turn it around? We will see tonight at Carver-Hawkeye Arena. Thanks for being with us and making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. Don't forget, we got you covered. All your favorite teams. Locked On doesn't matter. MLB, NFL, NBA, NHL. We got you covered there. Craig Sheeman hitting you up with Locked On Big Ten, Locked On Fantasy Sports, and on it goes. Doing great work all across the board. Thanks for being with us today and talking Hawkeyes with us. We'll be back with you tomorrow. Until then, go Hawks.